The FBI made a surprise appearance in our ongoing series, exposing the truth about Congressman Corey Mills. FBI whistleblower Steve Friend will tell us about multiple red flags from a potential rogue agent.
You know, Jill, it turns out if you mess with Blaze Media sources, you're going to get burned.
And we'll have the perfect send-off for red-blooded, patriotic Americans to close out the week.
That's right. We're going to sail towards nationalism this weekend. I'll make sense of it at the end of the show.
Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Well, good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
It's a beautiful day, a beautiful Friday in America, Jill, and it's about to be a beautiful weekend for all of us.
A beautiful 3-day weekend. But before we get there, if you watched the show yesterday, you're probably shocked that an FBI agent jumped into our story, probing around with our Corey Mills sources in the Bureau. Told us they knew nothing about it. So here to give us his insider insight here for the FBI's, one of our best friends, is FBI whistleblower Steve Friend. So Steve, thanks so much for joining us. I know that you've been following along with this story. So what did you make of this latest twist and turn in our saga here, along with Congressman Corey Mills?
This should shock the conscience of anybody who believes that the FBI should be, or in fact now has been renovated into an objective force for good. The fact of the matter is that the conduct of this agent, the fact that she engaged in either off the books or some sort of coercive investigative matter, a sensitive investigative matter, and involved herself in a deprivation of rights, a color of law violation, speaks volumes of the fact that the rot exists not just at the very tippy top of the FBI. It can't just be a change in leadership, but there needs to be a full vetting and fumigation of what has gone on there for a number of years.
So for the folks following at home, of course, this FBI agent represented herself as doing an investigation, an official investigation for the FBI. She was with the FBI and she was telling sources. Her sources were people who were speaking out against Corey Mills and doing research on his record. She told them that she was investigating the congressman, and eventually they thought maybe she's actually investigating us. And at this point, no one knows what exactly she was doing because this was apparently off the books. So a lot of questions for you, Steve. But first, what would an FBI agent do in an actual investigation? What would they have? What steps would they have to take if they were going around talking to these sources about the congressman?
It would be extra sensitive because it involves numerous parties that would make this type of an investigation, regardless of who the subject is or the victim is, in this case, a sensitive investigative matter. So there's extra scrutiny, extra layers of bureaucracy, because any sort of investigation that involves a politician, a foreign official, somebody of high public esteem or prominence, a member of the media, a religious organization, those are called SIMs, S-I-M, sensitive investigative matter. So the agent who was assigned to that case would need to get some sort of approval from not just their frontline supervisor, but all the way up to the special agent in charge of their entire division, as well as coordinate with members of the United States Attorney's Office or the Department of Justice at the very outset of the case. So if this is an on the up and up sort of case, there are multiple people across the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office or DOJ who were aware of this case. Now, if it's off the books, that's completely off the rails entirely. But let's just say it's on the up and up. At that point, then there would be a case opening and a EC, which is an electronic communication, which you would enter into the FBI software, which is called Sentinel, to start your case, where you would explain the nature of the crime or the allegation of the crime and the justification for you conducting the investigation. And then you would use whatever tools that you were deemed to be investigatively necessary in order to bring about a judicious and quick and speedy investigation of that violation.
Now, is there any way that an FBI agent could just kind of poke around on their own? I mean, without filing anything? Like, can you just say, I'm interested in this topic. I'm going to go have coffee with someone and ask them about it?
Sure. I mean, there's always these sorts of ways that cases can begin. I mean, you want to go through a fact-finding effort, at least in the very, very modicum stages of it. I mean, you'd have conversations with law enforcement or maybe the first reporting party. But whatever the actions you took, especially for something like this where it involves a political figure or a member of the media, it would be documented just to memorialize it because it is so sensitive. So it might not, in fact, lead to the opening of a preliminary investigation or actually a full investigation, but at the very least should be documented and a justification for the actions that you took. And then if you wanted to shut it down, the decision that you made and the justification behind that.
So we know for a fact that this agent, Shady Bradley, was given a lot of names, and she actually didn't go through and contact all of those names, all the contact information that she was given. So if you were told as an FBI agent that had an open investigation, these are former or current primary sources in investigation that you're looking into, would it be highly unusual to not follow through with at least contacting them at least one time?
It would be extremely inappropriate and unprofessional to do that. You have that sort of information at your fingertips. You would want to pursue all angles, again, as much information into hand as you possibly can so that you can make an adequate judgment on whether or not the case should be pursued further or if it should be shut down at this point. The fact that there were numerous people who were named and in fact were willing to speak with this agent indicates that at the very least, if there was in fact a justifiable reason for opening this case, she just didn't do a very professional job of doing it.
Now, she told everyone that at first she was going after she was digging into stolen valor claims, and then she changed it to say, now I'm going after, looking into his business dealings. Do you have any comment on that? Does that make sense to you? I mean, what kind of cases does the FBI, would an agent be digging around for?
The second half makes way more sense to me than a stolen valor allegation. I'm really not briefed up well on any sorts of federal crime that might violate, but public corruption, complex financial crimes, someone in a position of public trust, that's exactly the reason why the FBI exists. So to look into a congressman for those sorts of allegations makes sense to me. Even partnering with a compatriot over at Department of Defense just because of the nature of the original crime or the stolen valor accusations. And on top of that, the arms dealing, you'd want to have somebody who perhaps has a greater subject matter expertise than you. But the public corruption angle, to me, would make the most sense if it in fact was a justifiable investigation. But again, we're back to sensitive investigative matter. And this agent did not alert anybody from what we can understand.
So yesterday, our Steve Baker, the investigative reporter that he is, found that Agent Shady Bradley was going to be out speaking at a Memorial Day event. And Steve actually got to catch up with this agent. So I want to get your analysis on this video. Let's watch it.
Sir. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Very, very well. So, you're also an FBI agent, aren't you?
I don't know, sir.
Well, I would be curious as to what your thoughts are on the current Bongino Cash Patel administration.
I don't have any, sir. I appreciate it.
You don't have any comments on that whatsoever?
No, sir.
Are you aware that Blaze Media just came out with a story about you today and your relationship to Congressman Corey Mills?
I still have no idea what you're talking about, sir.
You have no idea what I'm talking about. Is it true that you tried to recruit a source as an undercover operative to investigate a Blaze Media journalist?
Sir, I still have no idea what you're talking about.
You have absolutely no idea what
But
I'm
I
talking
appreciate you coming, and I thank you so much.
All right. So as an FBI agent, take us what you see in that video. What stands out to you about that interaction?
Well, a couple of things immediately come to mind. First of all, she's an FBI agent who's apparently walking around unarmed, which should speak volumes of the type of caliber of person who is entering into federal law enforcement at this point. From what I understand, the speech that she was delivering, it was a Memorial Day event. She spoke to the fact that she's a veteran of the armed services and she suffers from post-traumatic stress syndrome and has required lots of counseling to deal with that, which, again, you got to scratch your head why we're issuing a security clearance and potentially a firearm, even though she just chooses not to carry it, to a person who could be suffering from that sort of disorder. As she's talking to your compatriot there, Steve Baker, the FBI furnishes you credentials. You're not a secret agent. As much as you might be working on things that you think are secret or classified, you're supposed to furnish those credentials upon request to anyone. You're supposed to be a public servant. And the fact that she's denying that, I think it also speaks volumes, again, to her character and the fact that she knows she's caught up in this. And you cut the video a little bit early, but I believe she laid hands on Steve Baker at one point, and I don't think that that was a wanted human contact. I'd be interested to know if he was going to file some sort of complaint.
Steve, he's not a complainer, but I don't know what he'll do in this case. So before we talk about possible implications here, there's also the curious way in which she conducted the interviews. I know, I think you've read the articles that we've written on this, but just to rehash, I mean, she used text messages. There was apparently no recordings, or she never said she was recording anyone. Showed up at one person's house, had some, Starbucks meetings. Was there anything odd about any of that?
Well, the FBI does not require you to actually record your interactions or your interviews, and that's something that I would actually like to see the Department of Justice, maybe an Ed Martin type, bring about, because let's memorialize everything. But to meet with people face to face, that's the proper way to actually conduct an interview. To do so solo, it's unusual. Normally, when you are working in an office with multiple people, as this agent does in Orlando, then the standard operating procedure is to bring a second agent with you, or maybe another member of law enforcement, just for safety protocols. It's not required, but again, for someone who's not carrying a firearm, might be a good idea to have somebody else in the room. Any sort of other communications via the phone or an email, those are allowable, but it should be under extreme circumstances, particularly for a sensitive investigative matter. And never in my career as an FBI agent, I do anything like conduct an interview via text messages. That seems wholly inappropriate. And if she used her bureau-issued cell phone, that's going to be memorialized permanently, which should probably be referred over to the Office of the Inspector General.
Well, let's get into some of the possible implications. Where does it all go from here, Steve? That's what we all want to know, because these are the questions that we still can't answer here at Blaze Media. But I would love to know from you, if this does turn out to be a situation where it is a rogue FBI agent at hand, then what should we expect to see next?
I think there's going to be a lot more of aggressive reaction to this just by reading between the lines of what the FBI has said publicly. They sort of disavowed her. They didn't really circle the wagon. So just from a procedural standpoint on the inside, she should probably be referred over to OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility, for an investigation. Simultaneously, the Security Division should assess whether or not she should hold a security clearance. And if they indeed suspend or revoke it, then she'd be sort of out of a job at that point. There should be a referral over to the Office of the Inspector General. The problem there, though, is that they might take years to conduct an investigation and effectively wait out everything, and then ultimately make a referral or not to the Department of Justice for some sort of decision on prosecution. However, we are blessed with having a Harmeet Dillon over civil rights and Ed Martin now over weaponization at the DOJ. I see no reason why they couldn't take this up immediately and take some sort of action criminally against this agent, particularly for violating Title 18 United States Code 242. It's a deprivation of rights allegation. If she happened to conspire with somebody else, it could be a conspiracy against rights. That's a misdemeanor, could lead to up to a year in jail plus fines. Let's say she even ran background checks on anybody over at the Blaze for an investigation of people for engaging in their First Amendment protected activity, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. That again is a violation of database use. That's another deprivation of rights. So it could be a multiple count charge criminally against this agent.
Now, I mean, so if we play this out, if this is a rogue activity, then either she is investigating a congressman on her own, or she's investigating sources and possibly even folks at Blaze News, maybe one sitting right here next to me. So if that was actually happening, would the FBI inform anyone about it? I mean, my concern here is that we need to know the truth of this. We need to know what the purpose, for which she was acting, what she was doing, why she was doing it, was anyone else involved? And it would seem like if they found out that she was in fact going rogue on a congressman, the congressman should know about that. And if they found out that they were, she was investigating these sources, everyone involved should know about that.
Yeah, Steve, let me know if I should expect a phone call or not. Please let me know.
Well, look, the number one rule that you're taught pretty early on in the FBI is that you can get away with a lot. I mean, that up to includes apparently having child pornography on your devices or engaging in domestic spousal abuse and still keep your job as long as it doesn't come to public light. Do not embarrass the FBI. And in fact, this report came out yesterday from the Blaze. That's the cardinal sin in the FBI. So I think that they will take this up, and they will actually advise people who are involved in this case. And I think you should probably expect and demand a call and an update on this, because if you're the victim of a crime at the hands of an actor, a representative of the government who's duty-bound, swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, which includes the First Amendment, and protect you and Matt and all of us from fraud and force, and in fact, that person turned around and used the powers at her fingertips and weaponized them against you or against a sitting congressman for their own political reasons or for whatever reasons and justifications that she had, out of step with the law and with the policy, then she needs to be held not just accountable by losing her job and her security clearance, but she needs to be criminally charged. And then they're obligated to notify the victims of that.
Believe it or not, I actually hate being the center of attention. So I can't wait for this story to go, when we finally have the conclusion for it. So now let me turn the tables back on you, because this is much better for me. Yesterday on the Brianna Morello show, Brianna actually had Ed Martin, who you were talking about earlier, and they spoke about bringing back FBI whistleblowers. Let's take a look.
And I also appreciate you bringing up the whistleblowers because, Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, those are two men who I am trying to fight for and bring back into the agencies, because these are great men. These two men need to be brought back. These are the type of people who could help you purge the corruption from these agencies. And so they should be at the forefront of all this.
I met yesterday on this topic of the whistleblowers, and we're going to fix it. And we're going to fix it because these guys are patriots. And I can tell you that you mentioned Dan and Cash, that they're on our side. I mean, there's things working through, and I guess I'll just say this: I have one speed, and my speed is fast, and so we'll get it worked out.
So I'll say we've heard this story before, right? But I do think that Brianna, Ed Martin, they're not fake news, right? They are the people that I would actually go through and say I trust what they're saying. What's your reaction to that video?
Well, I know Brianna Morello pretty well, and she's definitely dogged with this, and I'm totally grateful and appreciative of all of her efforts on this to try to hold people accountable. I've been out for 977 days, Garrett O'Boyle 970 days. We could have actually gone to the FBI Academy each 7 times in this span. So all the talk about recruiting new agents, you got two guys here that bring a wealth of experience and knowledge. We're just making ourselves available for tasking. We haven't had any contact in that regard. We want to be a resource for guys like Ed Martin, Cash Patel, Dan Bongino, if they want to lean on us for our sorts of knowledge and insights about what the problems are. As I'm trying to provide information to you as well, I'm willing to do that. And we'll just have to see. But the fact that Ed Martin is saying that he's ready to work fast, that's not the speed of government. And that's always an encouraging thought.
We hope, we pray that it works fast and that you actually get reinstated if that is what you wish, because you're not just our friend, you're everybody's friend here. So we always appreciate your time. And you know what? If I have any of these personal questions, we'll just do it right here on the show, because you're our personal FBI whistleblower. And who else do I have to go to, Steve? So thanks so much.
You got it. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.
You too. We'll see you soon. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Well, by the time the show wraps up, another family farm could shut down, and it's not from a lack of hard work. It's because most of your meat is actually imported from overseas. 85% of the grass-fed beef that's sold in the U.S., it's actually from overseas, and shoppers have no idea. That's why you need to shop at goodranchers.com, because you know it's 100% American. It's born, raised, and harvested right here, and you're supporting real family farms. So now more than ever, you need to make the switch to Good Ranchers, because they're tariff-proof. Everything is made right here in America. Grocery store prices can be unpredictable, but Good Ranchers is staying consistent. And right now, when you subscribe, you can get your choice of free meat for life. You can choose between Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box. Plus, you can get $40 off with my code Jill. So this deal won't last forever. Visit goodranchers.com today. It's goodranchers.com. Promo code Jill. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Well, I love it when we have Steve Friend on, because we always learn something, MP, when we have him on. And this time, It's even more interesting because it's the investigative story that we are a part of, that we keep working on. And just to hear him go through a potential rogue agent and what that would mean and all these potential consequences that could come down, he really had my attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he is the perfect guy to talk to, of course, on all of this. He's also motivated to criticize the FBI freely, given what he's been through. But what he told us was really disturbing, because if this is a rogue agent, and there's certainly evidence that points in that direction, and just what the FBI said is an indication that maybe she is. I mean, how hard would it be for them to find out if she was actually conducting a real investigation? You'd think they'd be able to do that fairly quickly. Instead, we had a statement saying, "Hey, we don't know, and we're going to look into it and take appropriate measures." So I was interested in the fact that he made clear this would be egregious. I'm glad to hear him say that, because I certainly think so. And I think, what is really owed is if she was investigating off the books, people need to be contacted. Like, they need to know that this happened, and we need to mark that in the press, because this kind of behavior cannot be tolerated. This is what everyone voted against in November of 24. This is why Trump, and I think the new FBI wants to move in a different direction. But if you're, just think about this, if you're representing yourself as an agent of the federal government, looking into something and deceiving people about that, I have to ask, first off, that's terrible. You should be punished for it. But B, what were you trying to do? And either she's trying to investigate the congressman, which is interesting. Like, why is she doing that? Is she doing that with anyone else off the books? Or she's trying to investigate our sources and potentially, you and others here. And that is doubly troubling, because there we have the First Amendment, right, being squashed, where you have quasi-government agents, using their government position to help, someone out there know all the names of everyone investigating them, and that's like pure communism. So we don't know, but it's very troubling.
Yeah, Donald Trump was absolutely, one of the things that he was elected for is to fight the weaponization of government. We have seen this, and again, with Steve Baker on this story, he is a great example of this. Just to go know his entire story of what he went through on January 6th, where he was just an independent journalist walking through that building. And then you go out and hire him here to come in for Blaze News. And then all of a sudden, the government is now interested in Steve Baker, where he was able to just go off on his own for so long. And as soon as he got here with Blaze Media, that became a problem. Yeah,
the hammer dropped all of a sudden on poor Steve, because we all both believe, because of his hire here, because he kept on the story. He was the real journalist, as opposed to the fake journalist. He was there by himself covering these trials alone, sometimes in the courtroom when no legacy media journalist was there, on his own dime. He cared about it so much. And then, that's why I hired him. And then you saw his dedication through them dropping the hammer on him, going after him. Thankfully, he's in the clear since Trump came in. But what happened was not a joke. And that's why this is not a joke either. You have to wonder, like, why are you going after people who are simply exercising their God-given rights to question the record of the people who are in Congress, who are supposed to represent them, a public servant? So, whether you think these people are right or wrong and what they're saying about Representative Mills, they don't deserve to have an FBI agent poking around. And if she's poking around in truth to go after the congressman, that's just as alarming. Like, what are we doing? We have the executive branch investigating members of Congress. Now, it's a little curious to me if she was doing that, because the way that she did it seemed to be more about gathering information about those who were investigating Congressman Mills. And, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this story just keeps on getting crazier and crazier since we started. And, one of the things I liked about it right away, is a terrible, I don't like any of this, right? I'd prefer none of these people had anything to look into. But one of the things I liked about it from the beginning, when you brought it to us, it was, there's just so much going on here, right? There's just a tangled ball of a lot of different things that are all pretty wild in themselves. And never would we have expected that in the midst of this investigation, we'd find out there's some rogue FBI agent poking around in the mix.
No, and I love it, because one of our sources, when I first contacted them back in March, he was like, "Hey, this story is going to sound crazy, right? You're not going to believe half of it, But just hang with me, and it's all true, and we have documents for everything, and that is what the FBI agent was supposedly looking into, was stolen valor. That's where this whole thing, this part of the story where these sources came in, this is where it all broke down to, was stolen valor. And Corey Mills, if we go back to his campaign, he was going out there telling his constituents, you should vote for me because I'm a veteran, I was blown up twice in Iraq, and I'm a good businessman. Let's go ahead and watch some of his campaign video.
I was hit not once, but twice with improvised explosive devices and explosive form projectiles. After you take a hit like that, you don't know if you're going to survive or not, and it puts your life into a whole new perspective. Would you take a hit for your country? Would you risk your life for the Constitution? Would you make the sacrifice?
Let's shift to what we actually know in the phone call that he had with Peter Giedel, MP.
You watch that, and look, a lot of this is known, and anyone in the military, people in the military talk about this all the time. When you serve your country and then you run for office, a lot of times people will exaggerate their record. But what's great about what's been going on the last 10 years or so is that a lot of that community has said, we got to put an end to the stolen valor stuff and just the exaggeration. So, the problem with that video is the guy doubles down on it. The actual words there, it's not just being hit twice. It's like these injuries being blown up. And the problem is, at least one of those incidents, it almost seems like nothing happens, by his own admission in the phone call he had with my editor, Peter Giedel. Everyone there said in one of those incidents, nothing happens. He's fine. And he appears to admit that in this extended interview on the phone. So already we have an untruth. Never mind that the other incident seems to be at worst a concussion. Okay, that's an injury, but it's not what you see and hear in that video.
No, and it's definitely just part of the deal that when I heard some of these things from the sources that we had, it made me question even more than what I had going into it, right? And I think that's the moral of this story, is that every time we turn a page, every time we get an answer, it leads to even more questions.
Yeah, and it doesn't end there. This is exactly the kind of thing that these laws, or the law they just passed in Florida, which wouldn't apply to him, I believe, because it's just coming into effect this year. I think.
July 1st, it'll go into effect.
But that law is saying is if you use this, false representation of your service for gain, like that's a problem. That's something that we're especially going to go after. And that's what makes this really troubling, because why would you double down in the ad like that when you got all this stuff you said about your record, including things that just seemed demonstrably untrue? We could find out. Was he in the Rangers? Why did he say he was? It's not on his record. He could have easily come out and refuted these sources who were really focused. Here's the other thing about this story. The sources that the FBI agent was talking to, these are all people that you have talked to, much more than I haven't talked to any of them, but you've talked to them, Steve's talked to them, Peter's talked to them, and they seem like very concerned former colleagues, concerned about some parts of his character. He was lying all the time. This is kind of the way he was, but he did some braid stuff, but he would just exaggerate and lie about it. And they were angry about these lies and exaggerations that they alleged, he's been trafficking in for a long time. And so there's a lot of anger there. They're sort of hurt about it, and they seem motivated by that, and that only, as far as we could tell. And they really wanted someone to tell this story, and a lot of people refused to do it. So we were happy to do it after thoroughly vetting it. And again, the egregious part of it is that's just the beginning of it. He's run on this record. There's other parts of his record that need to be investigated. Once you start to see this pattern of fabrication, you got to dig deeper, and that's what we've done. And it's very bizarre.
We will keep bringing you the updates as we get them, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll actually go out to Washington, D.C. and get the latest from Capitol Hill. It's Memorial Day weekend. There's a story about grit, redemption, and old-fashioned family values that's hit the big screen. You don't want to miss it. It's from Angel Studios. You know them from The Sound of Freedom and The King of Kings. Now, They have The Last Rodeo. It's an action-packed story of a retired rodeo legend who straps back in for one last ride. He risks it all to save his grandson. So he's the oldest rider to ever enter the arena. And the movie is about healing broken bonds, facing the past, and proving that real courage means fighting for the people that you love. It's raw, it's heartfelt, and it might just leave you tearing up under that cowboy hat. So theaters are selling out fast, so go hurry and get your tickets now. It's angel.com/Jill to grab your seats for The Last Rodeo. Everybody should go see it. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. That's angel.com/Jill. Just when you thought the big, beautiful bill had cleared its toughest hurdle, well, the Senate is going to step in. And, you know, sometimes they have their personal agendas, and they definitely have a flair for the dramatic. So let's dive in to the next act of this legislative saga. And that's where a handful of senators could rewrite the script entirely. So here with more from D.C. is our Capitol Hill reporter, Rebeka Zeljko. So Rebeka, how did we even get here? How do we absolutely go through overnight votes and crazy things to get this big, beautiful bill passed in the House?
Well, it was certainly, as you pointed out, a very dramatic saga that really came to a head in these last couple of weeks. As you mentioned, there was a lot of these overnight votes, these overnight markups, and the vote itself on the big, beautiful bill, once it finally finished going through all those committees, once it was finally put together and agreed upon, wasn't until 6:50, I believe, in the morning on Thursday. And this was, again, after another overnight markup. And so if the schedule in and of itself wasn't crazy enough, the drama leading up to the vote certainly was. There was obviously the SALT Republicans, a lot of those Republicans who are in blue states advocating for increasing the cap in the state and local deduction tax deduction. They definitely caused a lot of issues for the leadership going into the vote. They were really insistent on raising that cap. Mike Lawler specifically was very stubborn in these negotiations, and they finally agreed to a very generous $40,000 cap, which was $30,000 higher than the original cap, which was $10,000. A lot of math, but even more math coming from the fiscal conservatives like Chip Roy and Andy Harris, who just insisted throughout this process that there simply were not enough cuts. The work requirements need to be implemented earlier. There were all of these demands coming from the fiscal conservatives, the spending hawks, if you will, throughout this process that made it very complicated and that really delayed some of those negotiations. So much so that President Trump made a rare appearance on Capitol Hill this Tuesday. He came down to speak to the entire Republican conference, although we know which members he was speaking to more directly. And even after that, they weren't exactly persuaded. It took yet another private meeting with the president on Thursday, some of those House Freedom Caucus members, some of the Republican leadership to finally iron out those details and secure all of the votes necessary. And just to remind the audience, they really could not spare any votes. It ended up crossing the finish line in a 215 to 214 vote with Andy Harris voting present. And so it was a close call, but they managed to get it across the first hurdle.
Rebeka, I'm not going to judge you either way, but did you pull an all-nighter or did you actually sleep and then wake up to it?
I was blessed enough to be able to sleep in. To an extent, I did wake up a little bit earlier than usual, but, you know, I won't hold it against anybody. There were reporters who were out there literally curled up on some of those chairs and on the floor in the House press gallery. And so it could have been far worse, but I took the easy route, that's for sure.
I think that's good this time. That's good. Good for you. I'm glad that's the case. But I'm not feeling sorry for the people who did have to stay up and actually work for a living. That was a good thing. They went through their paces. Tell us a little bit more about this drama. I mean, who was mad and why? There must have been some angry people and some vicious moments.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, first and foremost, with the all-nighter thing, it definitely took a toll on some members. I mentioned in that final vote, it was a 215 to 214 split. And that's because two Republicans actually missed the vote. One of them was trying to cast his vote. His name was Schweikert. He was trying to cast his vote, but it was just too late. So he barely missed it. And then another one, Congressman Garbarino, who's actually part of the SALT caucus, slept through the vote entirely. And so these members were definitely working a bit harder and a bit longer than they normally do. As for the actual drama, a lot of this obviously took place behind the scenes. But what we did see in a more front-facing manner was a lot of this was coming from the fiscal conservatives, the Andy Harris types, the Chip Roys, And Andy Harris, notably, he voted present. So even throughout this whole process, even though he said that they kept moving the needle, progress was made, that they were getting closer to a bill that he was more confident in voting for, he, in the end of the day, wasn't able to actually cast a vote in the affirmative. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in these next couple of weeks in the Senate and when it is inevitably returned to the House for more drama.
Yes, and let's get into that a little bit more, because we know that the deadline, the theoretical deadline that they could move at any point in time, they moved it already for Memorial Day. Now it is the 4th of July. We had Chris Bedford, we were talking to him. He said, yeah, the House passed it for the first time, right? Alluding to the fact that it's going to go back there, right? If the Senate makes any changes, it's going to go back to the House. So how realistic is it, looking at that July 4th deadline, knowing that the Senate is going to slow things down? They have, like we were saying, right, all the personalities that you have to deal with over there. Chris Bedford often says they're like their little islands that you have to deal with, and they all think that they're special. They're all important, so they all need to get things done. So how realistic do we think this July 4th deadline is?
I think, like many of the other deadlines, it's going to be ambitious. I said the same thing about the Memorial Day deadline, and lo and behold, Speaker Johnson pulled it off again. And so anything could happen, I suppose. But we all know that they love to use these holidays as incentives to try and get some of the work done. Nobody wants to work through the most patriotic holiday, so I'm sure that there's a good incentive there. Now, something to keep in mind more in the long term is we, of course, have the beloved August recess, which is when lawmakers on both the Senate and the House side get the entire month off. Everybody books their vacations during this month, and so this is kind of a non-negotiable, final worst case scenario deadline to keep in mind. Now, to your point about all of the different senators, how they all kind of have their own personal, these passions that they want to make sure are protected in this big, beautiful bill. For example, Senator Hawley, he has been really outspoken against reconciliation as it came out of the House. He said that the Medicaid reform is not something that he's interested in. He doesn't want to touch it at all. And of course, this has been one of the areas of progress that has been able to convince a lot of the fiscal Republicans to actually vote for the bill. So it's going to be a very interesting tension on that issue alone. And there's many others to keep an eye on as well. And so whether or not the Senate is able to get it done before 4th of July, I think the bigger question is, will the House actually accept the bill that the Senate is able to produce?
Yeah, so, we talked with Chris a little about this. I'm curious about your take. I mean, first off, this was a big win for Mike Johnson. I mean, I have to give him credit. We've been hard on him on this show at times, but this was a big win, the fact that this got out at all in the manner it did, like you said, before Memorial Day. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that you're right. I mean, it is undeniably a victory for the speaker. Whether or not this was entirely his doing, I think that he can certainly take a lot of the credit for it. Of course, the president was there to help kind of expedite some of those negotiations to make sure that he was able to shepherd the Republican conference as much as he could. But even then, you still had some of the fiscal conservatives. You had the SALT Republicans who were just not willing to actually come to some sort of agreement until the very final moment. I will say, when I spoke with some of some of the House leadership earlier this week, the phrase I kept hearing was, nothing is final until it's final. And so it's definitely the attitude where it's like, okay, these negotiations are ongoing, they're difficult to actually nail down, but they're not going to be final until the final moment. And so rather than procrastination, I think that it's really more so just really focusing on finding that balancing point. That's another phrase they use a lot, finding the balancing point in a conference that's honestly pretty diverse. It's always going to be a tall task, especially with such a narrow majority. So hats off to the speaker. You really got to give him credit where credit's due.
Rebeka, I wish I were out there with you for Memorial Day weekend. Have a great one, and we hope to see you back here soon on the show.
Likewise. See you guys.
All right, don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Oh, we know we are winning. Conservatives are winning. Rebeka just told you. Even people out there in Washington, D.C., they feel like they're winning. The momentum, it's shifting, but we know we still have a long ways to go. And that's exactly why Blaze TV exists, because we need to still keep pushing. We have all the bold voices and the great reporting. But when you join Blaze TV, you're not just watching it, you're actually standing with a movement. And right now, it's just $8 a month when you use the code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT and use that promo code BNT to save $20 off an annual plan. Let's keep winning together. It's BlazeTV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand. We love Rebeka. A lot of people love Rebeka, but I do know that there are some people that are sad when Chris Bedford isn't on the show. But you know what? We've brought him back in our clip of the week. Take a look.
I have my dear friend Chris Bedford, who's an incredible journalist, in the studio tonight. And I'm going to ask him a really important question. Everyone wants to know this. How the heck do you stay in such good shape? I mean, you have a young child. You're, fairly, I'm going to say newly married, but not, you're young. But you look like a, football player. How do you do it?
Well, thanks, Laura. I found out that there's no time during the day or the night, so you have to do it before the sun rises.
Ooh, what time are we talking?
5 a.m. wake up.
5 a.m.? And what are you doing?
Give me a drop off. We do cycles, lifting, bench presses, you have to hit the bar, and then cardio, and there's some funny ones, a lot of crunches.
Okay, I was going to say, I knew you lifted heavy weights because there's no way you get that strong by just doing a regular deal.
I can't get enough of that clip. Did you know that we had a fitness icon amongst us?
I did not, Jill. I have to be honest. I did not. And seeing that clip for the second time, and only the second time I've seen it, is on the show. I thought we were going to watch him saying something about politics on Laura's show. I saw, I have to watch this. I didn't get a chance that night. But I did not know that. I mean, am I waiting for the calendar? I mean, who knows? The guy gets up at 5 a.m. I mean, who else does that?
At 5 a.m.? Well, she says it like it's such a revelation. Like
some people do get up and go to the gym, Laura. I don't know. But apparently our own Chris Bedford is a fashion icon. And like I said, he needs to start a Substack and more of these fashion tips about, bodybuilding tips.
Bodybuilding, workouts, all of the things. Well,
Crunches.
It's crunches. It's a big part of his workout, we're told. And he told us even more behind the scenes that I never wanted to know.
I have to say, I've worked out with Chris. I haven't worked out with Chris. I have had a lot of beer with him, which is why this was
shocking,
partially surprising, but great.
We are heading in to a 3-day weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend. So what do you have coming up?
Well, in a phrase, sailboat nationalism. This is my take on the weekend, the vibes that I want. The American Conservative Coalition, which describes itself on Twitter as building the conservative environmental movement, protecting our natural heritage, and unleashing American energy. I don't know much about them, but that sounds good. They have a great X account though, and they put out a post on X that simply said sailboat nationalism. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the vibe that we want for the weekend. At least it's the vibe that I want. I mean, there's a whole X account you just saw entitled Sailboat Nationalism that I follow as well, and it provides plenty more imagery along these lines of beautiful sailboats out on the water, which to me is what Memorial Day weekend should be about. It all reminds me of an article by our own Logan Hall on country club nationalism, where Logan argued once that here's an institution that hasn't been completely hollowed out, our nation's beautiful golf courses, and more specifically, our country clubs. And it will be a beautiful weekend for that too in many places throughout the country. And it's that outdoor beauty with, golf, sailing, that gives me the good vibes, the vibes that we really want, that I want when I enjoy Memorial Day.
Yeah, you're all about the vibes, but I mean, we can't go through without looking at the true meaning of Memorial Day as well.
Yes. Every Memorial Day, Jill, I used to think of family relatives that I'd never met, visiting the grave of a captain who died at Gettysburg in the Civil War with my grandfather, or my mother's cousin who died in Vietnam, whose name is inscribed on the Vietnam Memorial. But I have to tell you, since 2010, I think now of Sergeant Matthew Leninger. He's a friend from my college days, and I pray for him on Memorial Day, for him and his children and his family. You see, he was a younger guy around in my college years and sometime after, who was always smiling, friendly, helpful to everyone he met. And after losing track of him, after he joined the military and did 2 tours in Iraq, he reconnected with me a little online randomly in 2009, just on Facebook. I mean, I got this little message, classic Leninger. There's no grammar. He's just spilling it out of his soul with a laugh. But the next year, he passed out of this world in the midst of his own internal struggle. And his story, sadly, is not unique. 2021 study very conservatively estimated that 4 times as many active duty personnel and war veterans of post 9/11 conflicts have died of suicide than in combat. The last best data I could find estimated that we lose at least 18 veterans engaged in similar struggles each day right here at home. And on Memorial Day, we rightly think of most of all of those who gave their lives in battle. And you all should do that this weekend. But you need to remember, we all need to remember that war does not end when the battle is over. War does not entirely end when the war is over. As Abraham Lincoln once said, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace. This Memorial Day, we would all do well to meditate on that.
That is extremely well said, and you will once again try and get Abraham Lincoln into every show that we have here. But even just going back to the veterans that die of suicide, and I know that there is a big campaign out there to try and get that number down to 0, because they say even if the numbers are getting better, it is still such a problem amongst the veteran community. And it is so sad to see that that we send them off, these brave men and women, into battle, and then they come back and they're never the same. And we should be taking care of those people. It's so unfortunate, those that we do lose in battle, but at least the ones that make it back to our shores, we should make sure that we do everything in our power to give them all of the resources that they need. If we're spending money, if we're going to be $4 trillion over for our national debt here, again, just adding to it, let's make sure first and foremost that our veterans get absolutely everything that they need before we start taking care of all of the other countries and all of these other countries' needs in foreign aid.
Yeah, and it's especially sad because there was a time when veterans had a lower suicide rate than the rest of the population, and then it rose dramatically. It's gone down a little bit, but this is still an enormous problem. And it's something that I think every American ought to care about. When it comes to the VA and how these people are treated when they come back, that should be the very best of care. And I know the Trump administration definitely cares about that and is working on it, but it shouldn't be, what it's been like for the last few decades. And it doesn't have a good record in the last few decades. And that is unconscionable, especially when we do spend all this money, as you rightly say, Jill, and these people aren't being cared for. And in his case, here was someone who, obviously, he was troubled. He was wrestling with his own demons. He had a beautiful life, though, when he came back. And I look back at that moment on Facebook. I did reconnect with him a little bit, and you just think, could I have done more? Could I have reached out more for him and others like him? And we just need to remember those people this weekend as well, because these wounds don't go away, and that's also a thought for Trump's foreign policy, a policy of peace throughout the world. The seriousness of this, we acted like we could just go into Iraq and it would be easy. We could just nation build and be easy. And it's not easy. And the cost is high, and the cost is still borne by many veterans out there today.
We will be reflecting on that. I'm sure everybody in our audience will be as well. But you also have something else going on this weekend. Are you ready for your oldest to go through and graduate from high school?
Yes. I mean, I have my first child, a little girl. I remember, I'm just looking at the baby pictures now, who is now 18 and going to graduate high school. And she is strong, beautiful, and ready to take on the world. So we're going to celebrate that with some family this weekend.
As you should. Congratulations out there. We'll be watching for all of your future success. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here on Monday.